Now, what's grabbing the headlines right now is President Trump's trade feud with Canada. There's some sympathies in America for Canadians and some differences in our cultures. I came recently across a 2011 book, American Nations, and it helps explains a lot of things about America and how it was settled and some of our relationships with Canada, Mexico, and our politics itself. I spoke with the author, Colin Woodard, about that and so much more. Here's a bit of our conversation. Colin, I love this book because I have worked in national politics for 35 years, which means the United States. But what you help readers understand is to understand the politics within the United States, you have to understand politics outside of the geographic boundaries of the United States in some respects. Because some things that are part of Canadian life and culture influence America, some things that are part of Northern Mexican culture influence American politics. Broadly speaking, walk my audience through that.
Yeah, well, essentially, there's never been one America. There's been several Americas, and that's because the process of colonization was conducted by these rival colonial projects, right? The New Englanders, the Puritans coming to New England, and the second, third, fourth sons of the English gentry families who led colonization of the Chesapeake country, and Spain's colonial project extending south to north into what's now the southwest of the United States, and many other projects were all rivals. They were founded at different times by people with different religious and ethnographic and political characteristics who by no means thought that they were all going to belong one day to a continent spanning federation. And the differences in those characteristics have stuck in part because they were so strong, but also because many of these regional cultures colonized mutually exclusive stretches where they were the first colonizers setting down the assumptions and the way life ought to work and building the institutions over, two-thirds of what's now the United States prior to, say, the 1840s. So, I mean, it's left, once you know the settlement culture and the rival colonial streams, a great deal about our history and, current phenomenon become clarified.
You wrote American Nations. It was published in 2011. Anything about the Trump era and the Trump effect on politics alter or deepen your understanding of these 11 nations of America?
Yeah, well, the original book in 2011 was primarily a history, so it's sort of unchanged. But the books that followed from it were tackling, what holds us together, what splits us apart, how could we find a way moving forward that the country can function and the regional cultures could come to some sort of grand bargain. The Trump administration and the arrival of Trump in both first and second term definitely shook up the way our politics had been conducted and the central issues involved in our politics significantly. I mean, I can go into that, but yeah, it's a different set of broad binary choices in our politics now than it was typically throughout the 20th century.
So I co-authored a book after the 2020 election called The Big Truth. It was about the election in 2020, what actually happened, not the slanders and lies that this election was stolen or somehow manipulated to create the presidency of Joe Biden. But I started that book intentionally writing about some future point in American history in the not too distant future where a dispute over an election in one state could lead to another state not recognizing that state's members of Congress and pulling apart from the federal union because they didn't recognize a state illegitimately sending members to Congress and creating a fissure in this country. Can't travel there. We're not going to send our tax dollars there. A kind of balkanization of the American Republic. Many people looked at that and said, wow, you are really dark.
That's way out.
You're way out there, bro. I think I was looking into the not too distant future.
Oh, I mean, definitely. I mean, my background was, I was a foreign correspondent and a scholar of Eastern Europe and the Balkans, where, regimes fell and, democracy succeeded or failed. And absolutely, you can foresee all kinds of ways going forward in which things could fall apart. We don't want to go there, but if you end up in a situation where actors say on the state level and actors at the federal level both think that they're defending core elements of the Constitution, or say they are, and you end up at some point where armed forces of the two entities come to blows, both thinking they're acting legally. That's the disaster scenario.
And
You
you
don't
get
want
to
to go
that by
there.
the federalization of National Guard forces in states against the wishes of a governor. I mean, we're edging in those
Well,
directions.
well, and ICE, is a fair read of ICE is that it's operating as a sort of, gendarme, loyal to the president, not the Constitution or the rule of law, and to have that deployed is an incredibly dangerous force. Right? These are the ways classically that, free societies fall and dictatorships form is through these very things that we're experiencing now. And I was one who in 2016 was concerned about this because I've seen this show before in other countries. And, I think many of us who were very worried, and everyone was, as with your book, poo-pooing us. Oh, that's, you're being, we have institutions and norms, and you can't do that because the Constitution says you can't. The Constitution doesn't enforce itself, and, many other actors and institutions can become corrupted and not defend the rule of law. And that's been an experience many countries have had, and Americans are unfortunately learning a bit more about the tragedy of history than they knew previously.
You can listen to my full and multi-layered conversation with Colin Woodard on your favorite podcast platform.